Now I want to take a second, the last two, Monacan and Black here, are really quite radically different, and what you have as examples in 5 and 6 are really, I haven't been able to audio record yet, and I don't know that I will be, and I'm not sure that I'm terribly, it's necessary, with the Monacans and with the African Americans and the communities I'm working with. But these are really just kind of suggested hints at what these people are doing with their discourse and their genealogical and kinship discourse. The Monacan is quite different and represents, of course, different traditions, which I find fascinating. They talk about their ancestors, they talk about their grandmothers, they talk about it as a collectivity. And even though they have cemeteries with gravestones that look very much like all of the rest of the gravestones in the area with last names, surnames there and everything, people are reckoning kin more in terms of these collectivities and with non-surnames than they are with this practice of identifying in the Scotch-Irish way of agents who have a linear ancestry back to a common point of origin. Also for the Monacans, their point of origin is Bear Mountain in Amherst County, Virginia. That's where they've been, that's where their ancestors are, that's where their spirits are. So it's very different modes of describing power and prestige that need to be worked out more carefully in terms of how they look at a collectivity. The Black Kin Talk example here, this is highly fragmented, and it comes from a friend of mine, Elaine Carter. She's 70, Carter, she says Carter. She's 70 years old now, and she's, this oral history is recounting something about her tragic, about the tragic history of her kin in Montgomery County, Virginia, back when. And again, we have this problem of origins, we have this problem of being able to trace back, and we have basic problems even to reconstruct, because there are no, even the oral traditions are quite fragmented, and the written forms documentation is very hard to come by. And what we're discovering in Montgomery County is the gravestones that were on the graves in the slave path cemeteries have been plowed under by some of my colleagues at Virginia Tech in order to grow fescue and other kinds of seed, part of the agricultural farm. So we're lacking a lot of data. They lack the data. And what's happening then is this very fragmented sense, even with the terms of an ethnic identifier, is somewhat weak for this group. And of course that reflects a number of historical problems. Now, emerging from this comparison of various forms of constituting genealogical relationships within Upland South ethnic groups is a critical role appropriately used by genealogical discourses that have infusing value into the identifiers for these groups. Now, your Table 1 captures these variations. Note that more comprehensive and entailing the genealogical discourse is, the more likely it is to be patrilineal, patriarchal, individual-focused, and integrated into discursive practices signifying power, prestige, privilege, and that, all of that which we usually call whiteness. The values, kinship, and genealogical discourse infuses into group identifiers very significantly from identifier to identifier, suggesting those with the rights or authority to use this name also vary in terms of how they can access power and impact political economic life in their region in the United States. It's not just the well-known observation since the late 1600s that reckoning white bloodlines, that is one's pedigree, over generations is necessary for being classified as so-called privileged white. Rather, it's the conforming to the discursive ways in which these reckonings can occur is more problematic. Conformity cannot be isolated from other discursive practices embedded in the community. These systems of entailment prohibit such separation. We must look at the full verbal repertoire and then see how that the group identifier is stored, I'm using Gravener's term here, with value, both positive and negative. For when the constantly emergent value of a group's name and its autonym is more specifically known, then the verbal processes that constitute this value can be assessed as well. And perhaps linguistic ideologies of race that motivate the continuing binary system of white and non-white can be more fully understood for not only how they are structured, but also in how they function and how they're interpreted. And perhaps then we can begin to talk about some meaningful change in our society. Thank you.
I have a question. Nobody else does. This is, I see the crucial importance of about genealogy from the point of view of how people construct genealogy and discourse, and comparing how different groups do this, what discursive practices they use. But in these particular cases, there are such huge differences in their access to resources that I find myself wondering whether, for example, African Americans or the Native Americans wouldn't be doing this differently if the information were there.
I think the black case, they might be so. I think in the Native American case, they're so linked to their traditions. They're probably not, because they're very different. Since at least the ones that I've been talking to, I don't want to generalize here. This is where the issue of claims comes up. In the African American case, this is something this is difficult for me to do, and I'm going to explain not only because of my background, but because in these particular communities for the last 60 years, people have been asked to downplay race, to bury these kinds of discussions so that people can get along better. And only with this recent project and trying to, the colleague of mine is heading, in trying to get this slave cemetery on this local plantation, get it recognized so they can come back, have people begun to talk, and resurface their questions about the past. They still don't want to use the word slavery very often. And so, I mean, your question is a very good one, but what I'm saying is that I think that we have to wait for them to open up a little bit more in order to address that question and see if they would do it in the same way and so on. And I think that's an open question, to be honest. The whole black case is very problematic. Okay?
Maybe I'm just a bit confused. I wasn't quite sure whether you were saying that the Monicans, for example, could be fitted into a binary system. Is that right?
Well, I'm thinking of what I'm trying to say, a binary system in the United States, overarchingly, kind of our meta-language policy and how we deal with things, and the meta-language of our country, we end up dealing with binary systems. The Monicans would want a plural system, I'm positive, more than two. Okay?